Okay, we're still in our materials, Real Estate Law for Paralegals in Chapter 4. This is Part 2, Encumbrances. So we've been talking about what property is and how we own it, and our rights in that property. And last time we looked at how we start to lose those rights or how those rights are limited. And we looked at some government regulations. So now we're going to talk about some kind of different limitations on our rights. So what is an encumbrance? Well, it's a claim or a lien or a charge against property. It's something that brings down the value. So we looked at the government regulations, right, with some zoning and taxes. And now we're going to look at some private encumbrances. And most of these have their own chapters later on. So right now we're just going to kind of take a look at liens specifically. All right, so what is a lien? Well, it's a legal right or interest that a creditor has in someone else's property. Remember, we talked about an interest. You can have less than full ownership, and you can have these different types of interest. Well, the creditor can have an interest in your property. So if you have a lien, sometimes you'll hear the term cloud on title. That is what an encumbrance is, right? It's something that diminishes your title. But if you have a lien, the person who holds that lien can sell the property in order to satisfy the debt if you don't pay the debt back. All right, so now we're going to look at classifications of liens. So we have voluntary or involuntary. It's either going to be a voluntary lien or an involuntary lien. So voluntary lien means that it's created voluntarily. These are things like a mortgage. You enter a mortgage voluntarily. No one forces you into a mortgage. You're free to pay cash for a home or property. Right? No one makes you get a mortgage. You choose to get a mortgage. Although sometimes it may feel like you're forced to get a mortgage because who just has hundreds of thousands of dollars laying around to buy property? But it's voluntary. Same thing with a homeowners association. So no one makes you buy a house in a homeowners association. You choose to buy a house in a homeowners association. There's plenty of other properties out there. They may not be as desirable as the ones in a HOA, but they're out there. So if you buy into one, you're doing that voluntarily. Of course, an involuntary lien is not done voluntarily, right? It's without your consent. It's usually by statute. These are things like judgment liens and a mechanics lien, right? Those are allowed by statute. You'll go out and look to get yourself into a judgment lien. The next type of classification is general or specific. So it's either going to be voluntary or involuntary, and it's either going to be general or specific. So general lien is something that attaches to all your property, right? Nothing specific. It's like an umbrella that covers everything. So these are your judgment liens, federal and state tax liens, right? Those liens will attach to anything you own. Then we have a specific lien, right? That's one that is specific to a particular piece of real estate. Right? These are things like your mortgage, right? When you get a mortgage, the mortgage is on that property. And if you don't pay the mortgage back, the bank can come after that property. Right? It doesn't apply to any other properties. It's specific. Same thing with the HOA. That lien is for that property in that HOA, nothing else. It's specific. All right, so we've looked at a few types of liens, right? A mortgage, a mechanic's lien, and a judgment lien. So now we're going to look at each one a little bit closer. First, we got a mortgage. This is an interest in land that's created by a written instrument that provides security to pay back the debt. So remember these guys that were buying the house earlier in class. So when we first looked at them buying the house, they had a pile of money in front of them, and they gave it to the sellers, and the sellers gave them a deed, and that's how they bought the property, right? But most of the time, you don't have that pile of money sitting in front of you, just hand over. Who has hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Houses are not cheap. Even the cheapest houses aren't cheap. Still a lot of money to have just laying around. So what do most people do? Well, they go get a loan from the bank, because the bank has lots of piles of money laying around. So the bank gives the sellers the money. Sellers give the buyer a deed, and the buyers give the bank a lien on the house to secure repayment of the money that they borrowed. And that's the way the mortgage works. So next is a judgment lien. So this is a lien that's placed against you if you get sued and a judgment against you. So let's say you get in a car accident, you get sued, you go to court, judge issues a judgment and says you owe a big pile of money. If you don't pay that big pile of money to the person that you hurt or that sued you and won in court, then they can put a lien on your property. Right? They file the lien, and if you don't pay it, eventually it can result in foreclosure of your property. Then we have a mechanic's lien. So this is a lien that attaches when you have some sort of work done, right, on your house, some improvement. Normally construction, plumbing, pool, roof, windows, things like that. So let's say you have this lovely kitchen here, but you think it's time for an upgrade. So you call up Mike the mechanic, or Harold the handyman, we should say. And he comes in and he builds you this gorgeous, rustic kitchen of your dreams. Then he tells you you owe him a big pile of money. Well, if you don't pay him that money, then he's going to have a lien on your property, because that's the only way he can secure repayment, is to have that lien and prevent you from selling your property, or to sell it himself if you don't pay him back in time. All right, so that's going to wrap up chapter 4. Know what a lien is and a couple of different types of liens we looked at, specifically a mortgage, judgment lien, and mechanics lien.